Hello, everyone, and welcome to YPO Live. This is Yosh Eisbart of the Entrepreneurship Network. I am the vice chair, and I am so excited to be having the one and only Oren Zaslansky, the CEO of Flock Freight. Couple of seconds of some housekeeping items, Oren, before we get into it and we both share vulnerable thoughts and et cetera. So, this is going to be approximately 60 minutes, and please, we'd like to make this more of a dialogue. So if you have any questions, please put them into the chat, and then I'll be able to receive them throughout the presentation. We've already received some questions, so thank you for those that have already done this. And we'll do our best, because it's going to be content packed, to be able to answer all your questions. This video will be recorded, and it will be available on the source within YPO Connect in approximately 24 to 48 hours. So without further ado, I would love to get into it right away. Oren, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and thank you to the I can't believe how many folks are involved behind the scenes that you can't see, so it's quite a production, and so thanks to everyone's support for making this happen.
Awesome, and as we spoke about earlier before, really want this to be an opportunity for all of the entrepreneurs or folks that want to be entrepreneurs on the phone or on the call to be able to get an inside view of kind of your story, your history, some background, and potentially some nuggets that maybe are beyond the surface. So maybe for those folks that aren't familiar, if you could give a little bit of background on your background, story on your background, and kind of how we got here.
Sure. Yeah, and I think for anybody watching, and as we talked about in some of the prep calls, the thing that is super cool about the YP audience is that we get it. Like, everybody's running businesses, everybody's got the pressures, the family business, personal. The one area that I probably get most often asked to speak about is sort of the transition from the old to the new, kind of a traditional legacy freight business of all things, and then into the high technology and equity backed. So happy to, please feel free to reach out. Anything I can do to be of help to any member, I'd be thrilled. A little bit about my background. So what's become part of my fundraising pitch is I was born into freight, as dramatic as that sounds, but it really feels like it's true. My parents worked for a household goods moving company. So you moved from Denver to Seattle, there would be a moving company that would facilitate that. So they were employees of that company. So my entire childhood was spent listening to people talking about flatbeds and freight bills.
Exciting.
It seemed like the most normal thing in the world to me. I wouldn't have known any different at the time. Although my sister somehow escaped and now works in fashion, so go figure. When I was in high school, first my mom, then later in college my dad, they left the employment of that company and they started their own freight forwarders. So freight kind of brokerage companies. I am sure I wouldn't be sitting here today, and I'm certain Flock wouldn't exist had I not had that experience as a child of growing up around an industry, the freight industry, and then watching my two parents become entrepreneurs. I certainly didn't understand at the time that being 40 and 50 years old, respectively, having kids, having a mortgage, having responsibilities, and then leaving kind of the stability of a job, working for a large company, and then striking that on their own to start businesses, at how just crazy yet cool that is. So when I finished college at age 21, I decided to start a trucking company. There's the reason for the preamble is if I just started I started a trucking company and I was 21, you would give me that look like there's a backstory here. What could it possibly be? So obviously, being inspired by entrepreneurs, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It just looked cool. Did I know what it meant? Absolutely not. But it looked creative, and it looked like it had a lot of autonomy. And I think the creative part can be true. The autonomy part probably ebbs and flows, but certainly having the opportunity to start something was really appealing. And working in the freight industry was just what my family did, again, as best I could tell. So I started a very traditional trucking company. I financed it by factoring receivables.
Was that all out here?
Yeah, San Diego, native San Diegan. I live and work 3 or 4 miles away from where I grew up in Encinitas, a little small town here. And definitely not the trucking nor freight hotbed of the United States. That's kind of the Midwest or the East Coast. It shouldn't have been here other than I was here. And I think particularly through COVID in the last few years, a lot of folks, finding a way to kind of make it work wherever they are. And a trucking company can be more virtual than people realize. You have customers all over, your trucks drive all around, you can be sort of anywhere. It was, in many ways, one of the hardest things I'd ever done. It's that cold start conundrum. So I had no capital. I factored receivables. If hopefully most people watching right now are not familiar with that, but effectively borrowing at 22%, which exceeded my contribution margin. So I literally could not make money. So that meant I got good at managing working capital and DSO, DPO, and making sure that I was collecting that check in time to make payroll. Somehow made it work. It was the late 90s. The economy was favorable. It was expanding. Excuse me. And able to drive toward profitability. I actually joined YPO probably a few years later. I then started a traditional freight brokerage.
That was with the trucking company, or was it a pivot?
No, I mean, I had the trucking company. I felt like I kind of understood that. I grew that to about 125 trucks. So far from being, like a big trucking company in the scheme of it. But, it was a real business. I had employees. I had obligations. But I just wanted more. It's not that I wasn't proud of what we had built. I think that I was just looking for something a little bit more complicated, which in retrospect, boy, did I get it based on what I'm doing today. But it was sort of put it in the truck, pick it up on time, deliver it to the customer on time without damage, and that was success. I wanted something more, just sort of in the way that it's like an itch in the back of your neck. You don't exactly understand it, you just know that you don't feel fulfilled. You just want more. So put a manager in place to run that company, and then I started a traditional freight brokerage, kind of buying and selling freight. That was a blast, and still is a blast, because I felt really unconstrained. It was no longer if you're a shipper, if you're one of my customers, a manufacturer, and you said I have a need for services. When you're a trucking company, the answer is yes or no based on whether or not you have a truck. It's just kind of that simple. And that was really constraining, if not frustrating for me. Versus moving into the brokerage or being a third party, the ability to say, sure, I can figure that out. I think for many of us in YPO, I walked out of plenty of rooms having done $1 million handshake saying, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that, but I know I can figure it out.
Exactly.
I'd never sold a deal I didn't believe I could figure out, but I've sold plenty of deals that I didn't exactly know how I was going to figure it out. And then you scramble and you work your ass off and you find a way to make it happen. Put me through 2007, 2008, Great Recession. Now that I think about it, I think I joined YPO in 05 or 06. So just before kind of the party came to an end. I remember doing many, many YPO events in 07, 08, which were somewhere between just everybody hugging and crying and supporting each other. We're gonna get through this, to real strategic and tactical X's and O's and how we're gonna navigate these really tumultuous waters. It was a critical component of support for me, and I know for a lot of other folks. I was in the coastal San Diego chapter here in San Diego. Honestly, just grinding through that period. I don't think, if anybody were to ask me what were the lessons learned, I just work even harder. I don't know. I don't think that there was any silver bullet for me. I think
and this is all pre-flock?
Pre-flock,
okay.
Yeah. Just continuing to put your head down, one foot ahead of the other, never giving up, having to make cuts, having to get lean, and at the same time, just continuing to believe that you're going to find your way through this. I mean, it was a really tough and long and protracted period. Kind of came out of that around 2011, 2012, started thinking again creatively, what's next? I want to do more. By 2014, reaching out to a couple of friends and mentors, both that I met through YPO. One is a business school professor at the time at Harvard Business School, who I'd met through the YPO HBS program. For those of you who've maybe heard about that and haven't made the leap, single best thing I've done in YPO by far. That HBS program is phenomenal. Made friends for life and learned more than I possibly ever could have imagined. And who knows, best friend and co-founder is a professor at HBS. So who would have thought that would have come out of it? And his name's Toby Stewart. And then also Jim Braylene, who was a YPOer here in San Diego, now in Gold, about 10 years older than me, just great friend and mentor. And I went to the two of them in 2014. I said, I have an idea. But this time it isn't going to be kind of my third freight company that I'm going to bootstrap and just kind of put the personal balance sheet to work or borrow at high interest rates. I'm going to have to raise outside capital. This is going to be my first tech company. It's going to be focused in the freight space. I want to algorithmically carpool LTL and partials. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah, let me skip right back to that. I'll finish this part of the story. So, again, that YPO framework of teeing up relationships that are real and authentic, where these are people who would tell you I think it's a terrible idea, or they'll tell you I think it's great. And I really needed that. Even I had started 2 companies, I had the confidence to start a third, but I still felt way out of my comfort zone. That I was going from the old to the new. That I was gonna have to raise venture capital. I've never done that before. I don't have any clue how that works. I mean, I structurally didn't know how it worked at the time. Didn't know who to talk to, how to go about that process, just how to even think kind of what I call thinking use cases instead of thinking freight bills. It was before I had made that transition. So meeting up with the 2 of them and forever thankful and grateful, they not only helped me with the kind of the strategic and the tactical X's and O's, but they gave me the confidence. I saw myself as like the little bootstrapper from San Diego who was like playing around in freight. I had a hard time imagining that I could sort of walk in the shoes or sit in the seats that I sit in now, and I needed that support. I needed it. Absolutely needed it, and then my forum, of course, being supportive, and sometimes it's okay to just say, I need somebody to say I believe in you, that you can pull this off. So we founded Flock, raised some money, hit some proof points, raised some more money.
A significant amount of money. I mean, I think for a lot of the folks out there, I know I'm just trying to slow you down because you got so much, but can you tell in terms of the very beginning, you'd never raised venture capital before.
Yeah.
This was all new for you. You had some great mentors, awesome. How did you go about raising money? What was the strategy? Was there a strategy? Was it pray and spray? Like, how did you do that at the very beginning of Flock?
Yeah, so we've raised about $400 million to date. Our last round, coming on 2 years ago, valued us at $1.3 billion. It was very strategic, very thoughtful. So I had one mentor Jim, who's a former tech founder. So he really deeply understood sort of the notion of the operating side of this and building your plan and what's the strategy of the firm. Toby is an academic, not an operator, but has tremendous experience working in entrepreneurship and venture capital and had those relationships. I've given this advice many times to newer founders who are raising equity for the first time, and they'll want to say, well, what's your fundraising strategy? How should I think about that? And I probably frustrate the hell out of them when I say, well, I don't know, what's your business strategy? And they're like, well, I need to raise $1 million, or I need to raise $10 million. And I would say, well, I don't know, do you? I mean, most businesses don't need venture capital, and if you don't need it, I don't recommend it. It's not as awesome and cool as I thought it would be outside looking in. What it is a tremendous amount of responsibility, a tremendous amount of hard work, a lot of governance, a lot of oversight, as it should be when other people put lots of money into your bank account. So we knew we needed to raise because we had to build a business to scale. So we do algorithmic carpooling. What does that mean? Dirty little secret of our industry, working in the US freight industry, which is about $1 trillion a year in the US, is that every other truck you see on the highway is half empty. So that's a nightmare. That's a financial nightmare. We're paying for trucks to run around half empty half the time, and it's a sustainability nightmare.
I was going to say.
You're burning the same amount of diesel fuel, whether the truck is half empty or full, or almost the same amount of diesel fuel, so let's get them full. And just from a congestion standpoint, imagine if we could have 25% less trucks on the road, like that would be, everybody would win in that environment. So what are shippers doing? They're doing one of two things. One is they're either buying the whole truck and only getting it half full because the freight's got to go. We talk in terms of freight, but what is that freight? It's the goods that all of us have purchased and consume. It's food, it's shelter. I mean, literally, that's US GDP rolling in our industry. That's one option, and that's super wasteful. The other option is they send it via a very dense hub and spoke terminal infrastructure called LTL. LTL stands for less than truckload. So the easiest way to think about it is just FedEx or UPS without the planes. Big trucks, little trucks, warehouses, terminals, forklifts, labor, 7 drivers, 7 trucks, 7 warehouses or terminals between the origin of LA and the destination of Chicago. Super high CapEx, super high OpEx. It's also very low quality. On-time pickup rates are very low. On-time delivery rates are very low because it's complicated. You're playing kind of Frogger and hopscotch all the way across country. Damage rates are very high because you're loading and unloading. You're constantly handling the freight. And there's a lot of loss and theft. Unfortunately, chain of custody becomes a problem. So the Flock thesis is, what if you could ship everything as a full truckload, but you don't have a quantity enough to buy the whole truck, so you could just purchase your share of the truck. So we invented a new category called shared truckload. So if there's less than truckload and there's full truckload, shared truckload is everything in between. Is that a big category? We think it's about $150 billion a year in the United States, give or take. It's a really big number. By sharing that truck, I think of shared truckload as a double entendre. One is you share the truck with our other customers. So you could just buy a quarter of a truck, and Flock has the technology and the wherewithal to find the other 3 or 4 customers needed. But I also think of it as being able to buy just the share of the truck that you need. So it's almost, kind of like a timeshare or kind of like an Airbnb. You don't have to take possession of the whole asset. You can just buy what you need at that time. In order to build that, the reason why we're a tech company, my first tech company, not my third freight company, is the optimization work and the pricing work we do is excruciatingly complicated. So if you would imagine from an optimization standpoint, we have to play Tetris in the truck. We have to imagine all the different configurations this freight could go. We have to put it into sequence in the truck because everything's in what we call last in, first out, LIFO sequence. Once it goes in, we can't touch it till we show up at your delivery point to make your delivery. But then we also have to be able to price things into the future. So if one customer comes to us and says, hey, tomorrow I want to buy a quarter of that truck, LA to Chicago, that's awesome. But for me to give you a price, I'm going to buy the whole truck underneath it. I say buy in air quotes. We're going to contract to a carrier, right? We don't operate any vehicles. I then have to guess if I'm going to get the other 3/4 of the truck sold. And if our point of view probabilistically is it looks really good, we're going to get the whole truck full, then I can surge down the price to the customer and be super aggressive, maybe even be the low cost leader. If we look at it and it's all done in a machine learning environment, it comes back and says, no, this is terrible. You're not gonna get anything else to go with this. We will surge the price up to the customer, very elastically moving prices up and down.
So thank you for all that. In terms of going a little bit back in terms of the raising the capital at the beginning. So one of the reasons why you wanted to raise money this round versus other was because of this technology and the need to have the developers and the engineers and software.
We knew that we would have to build a tremendous tech stack on the one hand to be able to create this capability. We also knew that we'd have to have a lot of shipment volume in this combinatoric engine, in this optimization engine. So a carpool 1 + 0 is still 1. You can't carpool one thing. So by definition, you need at least 1 + 1. That would equal 3. Like that's the value creation for us. So we didn't know how big had to be, but we knew we had to be big. And as weird as it was that we threw a dart on the board, we kind of got it right. Like we knew we had to be sort of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue and transactions and liquidity in order to be able to provide high levels of carpooling outcomes, because we're a B2B provider. I mean, it's much easier in like consumer ride carpooling because you're very tolerant of all sorts of things that in a B2B world, they're not. They want it picked up at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. They want it delivered at Thursday at 8 a.m. It's got to be delivered in a certain way, taken to a certain place, because it's Coca-Cola, it's Pepsi, it's Starbucks, it's major customers that have enterprise class requirements. So we knew we had to build a big business, and we knew we had to invest in things like tech and R&D that were going to take a long time to provide a return. That does typically equal raising equity, if not venture capital. So there's all manner of equity, right? You could do angel round, friends and family. We see a lot of that in YPO. You could try to do a private equity round. For us, it was going to be venture capital. It was going to be super risky. We needed the prices to be relatively high in order to raise sufficient sums of capital. I think a lot of folks who haven't gotten to live the special kind of joy that I have in raising venture capital is it's very easy to get drawn to these big prices. Your company's been valued at $10 million, you haven't even started yet. It's valued at $100 million, it's valued at $1 billion. These are nonsense numbers. They are nonsense numbers. I'm not arguing that. There are some formula and some equations as to what drives that, but it's a lot of craziness, right? But it is also a formula or a metric whereby a founder can take on dilution, raise capital, and still feel like you have a meaningful piece of ownership in the business that compels you to want to keep working too many hours, as you know, to keep driving enterprise value and ultimately shareholder value. So if you think you're going to need $500 million between the beginning and the end, let's just say the end is profitability or an exit, to the point where you're just not concerned anymore about raising capital, then you're going to have a valuation at some point or another that exceeds the the amount of capital that's been raised.
So
otherwise, there's no equity left.
So, I mean, super familiar with that, and Fulfilled, my company, is in a much earlier stage than 1.2 billion in value, and we've raised venture capital as well. When you were first raising that amount, how did you come up with the number that you needed? Was it based upon that you wanted to raise 5 million on 20 or whatever the number was in terms of to come up with a dilution number, or was it that you wanted to raise a certain amount of money because you reverse engineered to say that this is going to be as much engineering hours in order to build a product for product market fit or blah, blah, blah?
It's a little bit of all those things. It's also sort of what the market will bear. So you want to raise, some people call it a pre-seed, others call it a seed, but let's just keep it simple and say you need to go out and raise your first $1 million. And it's going to be institutional. Maybe you've been able to self-finance, or you've done an angel round, your YPO buddies or friends and family, but you need that $1 million of institutional capital. Today it's probably more like $2 or $3 million of institutional capital. Some of it too is very formulaic. VCs at the seed round usually want to buy 10%. It's kind of their normal rule of thumb. So if you feel you need $2 million, then you're backing into an $18 million pre-money, $20 million post-money. Do you think you can get that? Will the market bear it based on what you've built, based upon the magnitude of the opportunity, based on the team, also based on the times? The world shifted a lot over the last 15 to 18 months.
And you raised this, 2 questions here, and some of these were some of the questions that were coming in. So apologies for continuing to interrupt you, which I promise I will do again. So you started Flock though you started before COVID. Mm-hmm. You started before the sexiness, if you will, around supply chain.
Yeah.
Did you see the future, in terms of then?
No, look, I'm a freight guy. I work in freight. I saw an opportunity. Half-empty trucks doesn't make any sense financially nor environmentally. Doesn't make any sense at all. There's a win-win-win opportunity. We could provide much higher quality to the customer, the manufacturer, and in many cases lower their costs. We could provide much higher income earning opportunities for the carriers, for the truckers, by putting more freight on board and more revenue. And we're actually unlocking a pretty massive financial arbitrage between kind of high LTL price and low truckload cost, which is a complicated statement that we don't need to get into, but we were able to create and have been able to create a profit margin level much higher than anybody else. So we could, kind of an HBS thing, customer delight, access, supplier surplus, and profits for the firm. So everybody's going to win in this thing. We saw that opportunity, so we dove in. 2015, we raised $1.3 million from our seed investor Signalfire up in San Francisco. They are the best, bar none. Have not met another firm like them. And what was it on a, 8.5 million capped convertible. It was even kind of pre the era of the safe notes. Those were sort of out of YC, just kind of coming online. Where does that math come from? They invested $900,000 themselves of the 1.3 rounds. So like 8.5, there's that kind of 10% number, give or take. We knew that we were gonna have to raise a lot of money. How much was a lot, we didn't know, but that we ended up raising several hundred million. It was kind of roughly what we thought we would need in order to build the technology that we needed and build the stack of shipments and customers that we would need. And that's how we bring those two things together in order to create value. So we were, I guess I would say, more right than wrong. But supply chain going into COVID becoming kind of the hottest thing in the world, we were just fortunate. Or not, I guess as the case may be, but that was not premeditated. I was just sort of a freight founder who saw the opportunity and said, let's jump in. And then you're also saying, well, if I raise 1.3, can I build enough to get me to the next milestone? What does the next milestone look like? Well, they're gonna wanna see revenue at a certain point, shipments at a certain point, a number of carpools that have been constructed, some unit economics around that, a little bit of team that gets built. Is 1.3 million enough to get us there? Well, it's going to have to be. It's just kind of this pragmatic math. 9 months later, we had achieved, we thought, those milestones. So we go out and say, well, now we want to raise $2 or $3 million. Can we do it? Yes, we could. How much was the price? I don't know, roughly double, 15, 16 million. I think that round got priced, if I recall. And then you just keep repeating that behavior. Okay, now we got a couple $1 million on the balance sheet. We're gonna set up a new burn profile. What are the next set of metrics? I think the one thing that has been very eye-opening for me between not having raised outside capital is that you can't think of any round as a round. It's a series of rounds, and they're all interrelated. So you're doing, if you just kind of think it from a series standpoint, an A, B, C, D, maybe E, F, G, however many rounds you raise, there's always another round, even all the way through an IPO, which is just yet another round. There's another round until there truly isn't.
There's so much that want to double click into beyond the technical or in terms of the finance piece. But one last question on the finance piece, and then we can get into crying. In terms of the tranches, raising 200 million is massive, like super significant. Several years ago, what were some of the numbers prior to that in order for you to be able to catalyze to get to the 200 million raise, which is something, I think many of us would love to do.
Careful what you wish for, in my experience. So, the first round was 1.3. The second round was 2.5. The third was 7.
And that was all 7 was Series A?
No, we did a 1.3, then we did like a 2.5, then we did maybe a 5 million. That was like a seed plus, and then we raised our Series A with Google Ventures, GV. GV, that round was about 16.5. Then we did another like top up kind of bridge of 7, and then at 100 million cap on a note. A month and a half later, I find another firm that ends up coming on in a big way, who kind of wanted in, and we weren't raising at the time, but we had those conversations. We felt like they could be strategic and helpful to us. They're kind of a supply chain investor, a firm called GLP. They're one of the largest landlords of industrial assets in the world. So they're Amazon's landlord. So they have a really interesting point of view on supply chain. So they did like a $10 million round at a small step up on a note. And then that led us into our Series B. That was 50 million.
Wow. At
like, 200-ish pre or post, I don't remember. I think the post was a little higher, 235 or something. I think that's about right. And then we were heads down, and that took us into COVID. And we find ourselves, I want to say May of 2020, with a pretty good balance sheet and business starting to go, and everybody held their breath in supply chain for the first month or two of COVID. We ran scenarios of, winter, nuclear winter, thermonuclear winter, beyond, do we decommercialize the business and just, work on tech? We just didn't know what was going to happen. Everything did lock up for 2 to 4 weeks, and then it started going. And then boy, did it start going. We were approached by SoftBank in May of 2020.
Heard of them, yeah.
And it was a guy named Andrew Straub, who was kind of the mid-level guy on a deal team. They break up into teams with managing partners with MPs globally, and he's on the freight, logistics, and sustainability team. And boy, it was the best professional email I've probably ever received in my life. He said, I'll kind of de-identify some of the other firms, but he said, I know who you are. This is what you do. I know other people think you do A, but we really see it. It's B. And he was right. We were misdirecting people on purpose as kind of stealth mode, feeling a little bit vulnerable that we weren't as far along as we wanted to be. He said, I really understand what you're building. We've looked at the other notables in sort of freight tech, venture-backed freight tech that had raised big money at big rounds. We're SoftBank. We could have invested in anybody. We did not invest in those firms. We don't believe in what those firms are building. We've been waiting to meet you. I almost started crying. I was like, I felt so validated, like we're always a little less than these other people, and why? And we've done great, but there's always somebody you can be envious of.
Did they spell your name right?
They got my name right, first and last. It was amazing.
Dear Bob.
Yeah, no, dear, and then just kidding, So I wrote him back and said we should jump on a call, and we weren't looking to raise, but we're always open to it. Went through rigorous diligence. I know SoftBank has all sorts of reputations. All I can share is that there's no one SoftBank. There's really your deal team, and every deal team has its own managing partner, and every managing partner is a human being who's got their own preferences and their own expectations and their own background. There was a guy named Irvin Tu at the time. He's no longer there. Phenomenal investor, former Goldman guy who just, he seems like an operator, his intuition, although he's not. He was a banker turned investor. But just extraordinary, and built an extraordinary team. They're all gone now because it's SoftBank.
Yep.
And so we did a $115 million Series C with SoftBank that closed in the end of 2020. With big projections, we think with this much capital, we can take the business to the moon. 6 months later, Irvin called me and he's like, holy cow, we discount, outlandish founders' expectations by 30, 40%. You're exceeding your crazy numbers by 30 or 40%. Would you like to do it again? We'd like to preempt a D before anybody else kind of really gets it. We sort of said, well, we should talk. And we did that. So then we raised another 225, I think. That closed about 9 months after the 115 that we had closed. So, we've raised about 400 million, but like 325 of it, 330 of it came within 12 months.
Amazing. A ton of questions coming in. Can you share a bit about ESG and how that fits into y'all's ethos from, you mentioned earlier on that not only is it about the financial opportunity, but there's so much waste in half of a truckload. Can you tell us how Flock tackles that, why it's important? Because we're seeing a lot also within your own world.
Well, thank you for asking.
Of course.
Flock is a certified B Corp. So for some of you might be familiar with that. B Corp, to my knowledge, is probably the highest standard of kind of third-party validation of companies that are committed to sustainability and can prove it with data. So I think most of us know there are all sorts of kind of associations or banners or flags you can fly and put on the website and feel good about. Some of them are somewhere between just straight pay to play and others that are like pretty good. B Corp certification is the real deal. So we knew that it was who we are. We wanted to, formalize it, put a badge on it. Why? I think we thought a couple things. One is it would be a great way to hold ourselves accountable, a great way to fly the banner internally just for ourselves, to remind ourselves what we're playing for, to recruit talent. We also knew absolutely be a great way to win customer business, that those two things can coexist. I've said many times that I believe that sustainability needs to be profitable and frictionless. We need to make it easy for people to do the right thing. I've never met the person who says, I want to do the wrong thing and I'll pay more. Like, that's just very unlikely. I think that people often don't always make the right choice, and they know it because it's the lower cost alternative. But what if you could find a way to be maybe neutral from a cost perspective, or God forbid, actually find a way to reduce their costs? They will absolutely do the right thing. So there's two ways in which we do the calculations for the B Corp certification, which also then means we change from the Delaware C Corp that everybody is who raises outside capital to a public benefits corporation. So this is real from a governance standpoint.
Totally. In the life cycle, you started Flock in 2015.
Late 2015.
And then when did you convert over to B Corp?
It's coming up on 4 years.
Okay.
In June, July.
Okay.
They give you 2 years to change your corporate structure from what's most likely C over to public benefit. There's a key sentence in there just to give people an idea if you're thinking about doing this, it's real. In our case, we have a board of directors, financial investors, that says that the board of directors cannot place undue influence on management to prioritize profit over purpose. It's a pretty powerful statement that they cannot force me to prioritize profit over purpose.
And these are venture capitalists or...
This is SoftBank, Google Ventures, GLP, Signalfire.
Did you get any pushback when you were trying to do the conversion?
Not even a little.
We're in a trusted circle.
No. Not at all, for a few reasons, right? One is, for those of you that have outside boards and work with your boards, nothing happens at a board meeting. You talk to them before and after, and you build relationships, and investor relations is one of the single most important things I think founders and CEOs early to mid stage do. You get later stage and there are people who come in and help with that and it becomes more formal. But certainly in the early days, it's quite informal, and relationships matter. So I think there was a high level of trust that, look, we know what we're playing for. We intend on building a very valuable business and driving it ultimately toward an exit, most likely an IPO. And that's what we're signed up for. We're all shareholders. Venture salaries aren't typically all that high. You're playing for the equity, for the big payout on the back end. So I think they just trusted that we knew what we were playing for, number one. Number two, they understood it was good for business, that we have a real business model that helps customers save money, improve quality, and reduces CO2 emissions. If you've got a half-empty truck rolling down the road and we can get it full, we're reducing emissions. And to be able to go to a customer who says, yeah, every other truck I send out of here is half empty, if you can fill that up for me and provide me with a certification of carbon neutralization, we want to do business with you. They knew it was good for business. It would help grow our business. So they were very, very aligned with that. And then also, to be fair, our legal team and our sustainability team did a fantastic job of kind of ferreting out where might the pushback be. If I'm on a board, I'm a financial investor, and I gave you $1 and your job's to give me $2 back, understand how these rules work. Where might the bogeys be? And it came down to that one sentence. Otherwise, there wasn't any reason why they should really care. We did have some conversations, if there was any friction, and I would say very little, over how many B Corps have gone public. And how do the public markets treat that sentence? I think at the time so B Labs, who does B Corp certification, gives you 2 years from you've now been admitted as a B Corp to you need to change your docs. You have a 2-year period. When we at the time, so we made that formal about 2 years ago, there had only been, memory serves me, about 15, less than 20 IPOs. I want to say Etsy was one of them, and I don't remember a couple others that were B Corps in the public markets. And there was noise, not so much signal. How's that company performing? Well, poorly, I don't know. Is there a discount being applied by the public markets at the time that you have a public offering because of prioritizing purpose over profits? I think investors are relatively smart, and they look at it and they say, hey, this is part of what they do, and it's building as much enterprise value as it may hurt us. But the B Corp certification and the sustainability message has been a huge and will always be a huge part of what we do. I mean, we talk about our mission here of, we're going to do our part to change the industry. We're fundamentally building infrastructure, building a software capability that's never existed before, where you can have it all. And I just, I hope YPOers can particularly resonate with this comment, because I know it could be something that, may be a little bit insensitive, out there to say, but why not have it all? Why not work on something that can build enormous enterprise value, can build, wealth for hundreds, hopefully, of people, maybe thousands of people, and at the same time, do it in a way where you can do your part to make the world a better place. That's a hard thing to do, and I'm sure that sounds corny. It's corny, it's sincere. That's awesome. It is really sincere for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, weren't you just recently speaking at Davos around ESG with...
Yeah, that was an interesting experience in and of itself. I'm not gonna lie. Everything that you read about it and you hear about it is kind of true. You do really bump into global world leaders, and you have to kind of take a beat on that one. I had the opportunity to be on a panel led by Salesforce and on ESG and sustainability. And I think the coolest part about that, though, the thing I was most proud of, and I think was resonant because it was live in front of, 50 people, 100 people. It wasn't a huge room, but there was people there watching it, was that I was the only sort of business person for profit. There was a high minister from the EU, which was wow, for sure. There was a very famous movie producer, director, don't remember his name, but a real person whose passion was sustainability. There was a woman there who ran RED, the HIV awareness, co-branded RED iPhones. Mm-hmm. So kind of all NGO or passion project. And then I'm kind of the venture-backed slob who's we gotta build a business and get to profitability and get to market. And I didn't notice that. And then all of a sudden, as it just happened to be, I was the fourth of 4 in sequence to have an opportunity to talk and share. And I'm I'm the only person here who's for-profit. This is awesome. I think for-profit needs to have not only a voice at the table, I would argue needs to have a leading voice at the table. And that's when, for the first time, I've said it many times since, I looked at the crowd and I said, we have to make sustainability profitable and frictionless. And if Q&A and sort of, engagement is a metric of anything, really all those questions started coming my way. And I don't think it's because of me in any way, shape, or form. I think it was because, the private sector needs to take a leadership role in sustainability. We need to be easy to do business with, which Flock is very much still figuring out. We're not as easy to do business with as our future state, certainly. And we need to be profitable. I mean profitable as a headline to mean save you money or cost neutral, but it shouldn't be hard to do the right thing.
Yeah, awesome. Time is absolutely flying by. We only have probably about 15 minutes left.
Sorry.
So I want to try to get to a couple more topics. So more on the personal side. You now this is multiple companies. This one is the biggest one yet.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. What's no bullshit. Like, what is from an entrepreneurial perspective and your drive and ambition, along with being a parent and a husband? How do is there anything such as work-life balance in your world?
No, there isn't. My forum does the business, family, personal kind of buckets through the training. Probably most people watching it do that. And, to a certain degree, most of us in forum talk a lot about the business, and we can go on, and somebody's giving you the countdown like you're almost out of time for your update. And then you'll go to the family and you'll talk about maybe your significant other, talk about your children if you have them. That's pretty connected, I think, for most of us. And then the personal, you're like, yeah, I'm out of time, and I don't know what I would say anyways. So work-life balance, nope. I'm the furthest thing from it I've ever been. My self-care is at an all-time low. I exercise less than I ever have. I make no time for myself. I feel if I can find time to put into my kids, then that fills my tank up. And I don't know if that's really cool or just telling myself a story. If I invest myself into my family and I take care of them, I feel good because they're, the most important thing in the world to me. So that means I'm taking care of myself, right? I don't know, maybe not. I've, to some degree, always been this way, kinda. But it's definitely more out of balance than it's ever been by a mile. In 2020, and look, I think of Flock in almost 3 stages, like 2016 through the end of 2019, which was just early startup, everybody doing everything, grinding, inventing stuff, exciting, terrifying, raising money constantly, always out of money. And that's just kind of startup life, right? And then 2020 through about mid-22, about a 2.5-year period, the COVID period, that was like weird and surreal and working from home and all that. But the business just exploded in growth and exploded in capital raising. And there was so much volatility in the supply chain, as everybody knows, kind of, toilet paper and all that stuff. We were living it right in the middle of it. But it was thrilling, candidly. It was thrilling. And so my work-life balance was totally off, but that's okay because it was thrilling. Now, late-stage growth equity markets are frozen. We're kind of, you would call us pre-IPO, I guess. There's no capital flowing, so like every other kind of late-stage company, it's you got what you got to make it work. You got to cut your way into profitability. You got to grow your business, leaner. You got to be smarter. I think it's all absolutely healthy, if not overdue. So there's no pushback from me. But it is a distinctly different phase of the firm. And the freight world is in massive recession. We're in a massive freight recession right now. A lot of it is deflation coming out of the COVID inflation. A lot of it too is the shift from consumer spending from goods to services. During COVID, you bought a couch or you bought a new fridge and we shipped it for you. Now you're going to Hawaii on vacation because you can. I don't capture any revenue when you go to Hawaii on vacation. So that has been incredibly painful and doesn't show in the broader recession numbers because consumer spending is still there, but it's a massive shift from durable to non-durable and to services. So leading through that is hard, and I'm the kind of leader. I think most of the YPOers watching this probably feel the same way, but you got to be out in front of it. You got to be the first person in, the last person out. My wife largely gets it because, we were 18 when we met, got married at 22. I'd already started a truck company. So I think she's sort of like, yep, this is just kind of who he is. maybe I'm telling myself a story there. I do often feel very insecure that I'm not the husband I want to be and not the husband that she deserves, that I don't make enough time. The segment though that really just breaks my heart is my kids. Them not getting enough from me. I remember actually at a YPO event, we had a parenting coach, Susie Walton, local here in San Diego, Bill Walton's ex-wife. And she raised 4 boys, and a couple of them went to the NBA, and kind of this high performance family. And she said 2 things that really stuck out. One is, don't put your kids in organized sports until they're 10 years old. Screwed that up, but that was her, her professional experience. And the second thing is, it's less about the total duration of time you get with your kids and more about the quality of that time. So less about the quantum and more about like how you use it. Boy, I want to believe that's true. She said even 15 minutes a day, no cell phones, but like super dialed in, super engaged. I tend to be that weekend warrior now with my kids and the family, just all in on them. But I am wildly out of balance. My tank is probably as depleted as it's ever been right now. I don't know what to do with that, if I'm honest, other than just keep working harder. That'll make it better. Just keep grinding.
I sitting in this chair, wanting to be in that chair in terms of kind of the growth of the company and the success. I would have made the assumption, granted, with the entrepreneurs on the phone and us all being grinders as a generalization, I'd make the assumption that as the company would have scaled, you putting in leadership positions, not to say again, you're not going to keep your hands on the wheel, but then there's more delegation and potential opportunity for being able to then, take a Friday afternoon off, not to say you don't, but to be able to, catch a kid's soccer game or what have you.
Yeah.
Not fun.
I mean, look, we have a world-class, we define it as the executive leadership team, the ELT, that's kind of the C-suite. World-class. I mean, the best part about what I do by far is the people I get to work with. There's no close second. It is not the fundraising, certainly, or the media or any perceived gravitas. It is working with unbelievable. Every single person on my executive leadership team could easily and should be a YPOer. They aren't because they don't have the title CEO and president, because I do. Holy crap. I mean, the caliber of talent and just pedigree, top to bottom, they're unbelievable. So absolutely, yeah, they're doing that stuff. We are really inventing a new category. It is so hard what we do. And I think the hardest component of that is change behavior. We go to an enterprise customer, a Coke, Pepsi type, Kimberly-Clark type shipper. I'm not in those meetings. We have great salespeople. They meet with those people. They have great sales leadership, and they say, this is what we do. We're gonna take your half-empty trucks, we're gonna fill them up. We're gonna take your quarter trucks, and we're gonna move them like a truckload. You get all this great quality. You only pay for the amount of truck you need. Those customers say, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. We have to have it. How can we have it? So why aren't we a $1 trillion US revenue firm? It's hard. No one's ever sold a product like ours before, which means no one's ever purchased a product like ours. Right. They have software procurement challenges. SAP and Oracle doesn't have like a box to be able to buy a fraction of a truck. It's binary. You buy the whole truck or you don't buy the whole truck. So I'm involved in a lot of those things. It's also the staging. When a company grows really fast, I mean, there's nobody from my original executive leadership team except for our CTO. He's the first person I hired. He's still here. He's an extraordinary leader. We've gone through many extraordinary leaders. We just outgrow them. Yeah. I mean, sure, there's some stories, some forum level stories about some of the folks along the way, but that's a minority of the circumstances, right? The majority of it are, you're amazing, but
what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah, and so, is the answer then hire somebody from the $10 billion revenue firm? Oh, they don't know what the hell to do in a $10 million company. They don't have any clue. So I'm learning and drinking through a fire hose, trying to grow my own skills and my own kind of capabilities along the way. I think largely I'm less founder and more CEO. Although there are times of late where I felt like I need to be the founder, that's where the company needs is kind of some of that sort of inspiration and charisma of we're going to change the world. And then there are times where I walk into a meeting and it's just like, let me see the spreadsheet. Like that's all I want to see is, how are the dollars adding up at the end of this? And then maybe lastly, and I'm sure this is my own deficiency, is I am still very much running this business and I can never tell if that's good or bad. if I'm really honest. There are times where I think it's good. There are times where I think maybe that's my own failure, that it still needs to be run by me. Am I stepping on toes? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, I'm getting pulled in. I think that what we do is very hard, it's complicated. We don't have the benefit of looking at other examples and saying, oh, we could behave like that and achieve similar outcomes.
I want to ask one more question, then we've got a bunch of rapid ones, which we don't have a ton of time. You mentioned in terms of like not doing the self-care for yourself, in terms of kind of when you are doing it, or when you're looking for inspiration, or when you're looking for mentorship, how do you find it?
The one thing I'm probably pretty good at is saying I don't know how to do something and I need help. So you ask for help. We know this in YPO. No YPOer who's ever been asked for help before has said no. Now the follow through can be a little thin sometimes, but everybody says yes. It's an extraordinary organization in that regard. So you ask for help. I've got a small yet unbelievably connected forum where my life's been, bumpy of late. And, I have had to ask for reschedules, or I've had to ask for help and support in maybe beyond what might be otherwise sort of seem acceptable or appropriate. But they also know that for the most part, I'm like early and prepared and never ask for changes. And that, it's not like my ego saying I'm a really big deal, I need you to accommodate me. It's more like I'm in near crisis right now and I need help. And so they step up, in that way. So how do I find it? You just ask for help from the people that you trust and admire. It's almost always a YPO or a YPO originated relationship. I don't think of YPO, for whatever it's worth, as like the dues paying construct that it is. I tend to think of it more as just the humans, that the organization at its best tees up a moment, a chance for you and I to get to meet one another, and then I don't worry about the rest. And if there's a spark and there's a chance to connect and connect deeply, then where YPO is helpful is in our training. So we kind of understand how to do that, and we understand where we can go, and if we shouldn't go somewhere, why. That is very atypical, at least in my experience, for meeting kind of civilians, so to speak. But I just reach out and ask for help.
Awesome. We're going to have a poll that's going to come up probably in next couple of seconds or next minute or so. It's a poll rating this.
Oh no, that sounds terrible.
From 1 to 5.
Oh, no.
5 being the best, 1 being not so good. This is very important for us from the Entrepreneurship Network, for us to get an understanding of the programs that we're providing are of value. So please make sure that you answer the poll with a 5 right now. And while you're doing that, we're going to ask a couple more questions. So there were some questions that came in, and it's going to be quick hit.
Okay.
And they're all over the board. So Hassan asked, so quickly, because we got a bunch of questions. Yeah. What is your revenue model? Are you a matchmaking platform? Some of this you already answered. Are you a virtual expediter forwarder company where payments to drivers follow through to them?
We don't like the word broker. We don't think it really reflects who and what we are. The business model, though, in terms of revenue recognition, is that of a broker. So we have a manufacturer or shipper that is our customer. They agree they're going to pay us $1,000 to move a shipment from A to B. We bill them that $1,000. We then, on our own, make our own choice as to packaging 3 or 4 different customer shipments together and then sourcing to a carrier and paying them less than $1,000. So technically we're a marketplace of supply and demand, but it's not like an eBay where we just introduce buyers and sellers and then back off and take a take rate. So that's revenue recognition. Yes, we make the payments to the driver, but that's something obviously that goes through us. I think that was everything in the question.
Nailed it. Vinay's got a question. What are the top 2 challenges to Flock Freight's business model? Why do you think the LTL road trucking industry hasn't seen so much innovation over the last few decades?
By far the hardest thing for us is change behavior. There's not even a close second. We have SMBs, middle market and enterprise customers. The SMB and the middle market for the most part are pretty straightforward. From a procurement standpoint, the enterprise customers, the biggest people in the world, they say to us, oh my God, this is fantastic. I have to have it. How do I buy from you? And then we run into, they don't capture the data. They don't know if they're buying a whole truck worth of goods or a half a truck worth of goods. They want to know that. They then don't have the ability to trap that data in their procurement software. They don't have the ability to run an RFQ against that data. They don't have the ability to tender or make awards against this data. It's all change behavior. It is not a technological problem. It is easy, but that is by far the hardest part. And then change behavior in terms of our own people and the industry. People have a hard time believing what we do is real because it is so hard. It has been tried before, into the second part of that question, but it's always been tried before from an asset perspective. So we'll just use less trucks and less warehouses and terminals.
One more question. How did you go about building your enterprise sales team? Man, there's not enough time for this one, but that's a great one in order to be able to get you accelerated growth in this niche.
So I'll answer this a different way. I prefer the SMB customer. I would rather have 10,000 customers with zero concentration, paying full price with much lower requirements. Enterprise customers come to you and say you have to build a bunch of custom stuff. The challenge with SMB is ultimately LTV to CAC and the payback periods. Can you acquire enough SMB customers at a low enough cost to make the lifetime value math work? I would say that we had never figured that out until about 3 or 4 months ago under Orlando Baeza, our new CMO and now CRO, and his team have absolutely cracked the code in a way that nobody in the industry ever thought possible before, with a high velocity, inbound marketing driven SMB acquisition. I think you want those SMBs. I think that's the prize. On the enterprise side, I don't think there's any magic there. I mean, I think you hire enterprise leadership, you hire enterprise reps tend to be more experienced, tend to be more expensive, long deal cycles. Yes, the rewards are what they are. They can be massive for sure. I don't think Flock has done anything necessarily massively differentiated on that front. I think what we've done, and it's new, but on the SMB front, the middle market front, is extraordinary.
Awesome. And so you're going to lend Orlando out to anybody that wants.
Not even a little.
Cool. I think you actually got an inbound lead. Someone was saying your story is fascinating. They have 4 pallets to be trucked from Salt Lake City to LAX.
Yes.
They'd love to use Flock.
That's what we do.
We can connect you with Oren. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time. This video will be available on Connect in the source 24 to 48 hours. And as an FYI, we have another YPO Live, an entrepreneur story with David Duncan, the CEO of Silver Oak. I'll probably have a glass of wine in my hand for that one, and that's next month. Please look for that on the Entrepreneurship Network. Oren, dude, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks so much. This was awesome. Everyone have a wonderful day. Be well. Take care.